We're going into public session for the Harwich Conservation Commission meeting for September 19th.
This conference will now be recorded.
For January 19th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted in a hybrid fashion so that a number of people can dial in rather than having to be here in person. If you want to dial in, there's information on the Town of Harwich website under the Conservation Commission meeting for today's date. I will give you the dial-in information for the phone. The number is 1-669-224-3412, and the access code is 284-659-309. So with that,
Mr. Chairman, real
yes.
quick, you may want to announce the commissioners who are present remotely to.
All the people that are dialing in, would you please mute if you're not speaking? That'll help with the audio for us. And I don't see Mark or Al. Are they still on?
Yep, can we see everybody, Caleb, or?
I'm still here.
Okay, thank you. We just had a shrunk screen there. So on the phone dialing in, we have Commissioners Stan Pashizak, John Ketchup, Alan Hall, and Mark Coleman. And it looks like we have a number of other participants tonight. So let's get with that. We will start. First item on the agenda we have is a application for a request to change in plans for 23 Snow Inn Road, Map 8, Parcel P2-0, to construct a pergola over an existing patio. Do we have a proponent that's going to present tonight?
Yes, this is David McDevitt from Coastal Engineering Company. I thought maybe that Mike Charlotte or Bill Ganchett would be on this call also, but I know that Bill spoke with Amy about this trellis or pergola over the patio, and we prepared a plan that showed what the change is. So this pergola or trellis is proposed to be constructed at the south end of the coastal bar building and on the existing patio and located between the coastal bar and the glass windscreen and retaining wall to the south of it. No change to any impervious coverage or structure or anything of that nature. So Amy suggested we just submit this as a plan change so that the commission would have a chance to look at it and comment.
All right, thank you. Amy, comments?
I just wanted to keep it nice and tidy. The commission has made all your decisions on this, and because it's a change in plan, which is basically considered a very minimal change. It doesn't need to go as far as an amendment. But because there's no hardscape changes here, it's just a pergola going on top of an existing permitted patio, I would recommend approval of their request.
All right, thank you. Comments from the commissioners. We'll start with Jim. Do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions or comments.
No. Wayne, do you have any questions on this? Mark, any questions?
I just agree with Amy, thank you.
All right, thank you. Stan?
I'm just going to call here.
Ollie.
I have no comment.
Yes, Stan, we can't hear anything you're saying again. And you have to mute as well, Stan. Thank you. John?
No comments.
Alan?
No comment.
The only question I had was, is the pergola going to be fully within the footprint of the existing patio? With no overlap?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
Solid.
that's correct.
And is there any vegetation around the patio that would suffer from shading from this?
No.
All right. All right, thank you. I have no other questions. So can we have a motion, please, to approve the change in plans for 23 Snow Inn Road?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the change in plan for 23 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P2-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Can we have a second, please?
Hi, Alan.
All righty, great. Let's roll call then. Mark?
Aye.
Stan? Raise your hand. Good. John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And I am I, so that's,
My all.
and Jim, thank you. It passes, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a request for,
Thank you very much.
thank you. A request for a determination of applicability from the Eastward Companies for 0 Route 39 Orleans Road. It's a request for a determination that the area that's depicted on the plans is an area subject to the protections of the Wetlands Protection Act, and whether the boundaries are properly depicted.
Good
Evening.
evening. Bill Riley on behalf of Eastwood Companies. Dave Clark is on the line, who's prepared our plan. And this is Teresa Sprague hiding behind her mask of Blue Flax Design. I think I prefer to start with Teresa unless you want it to go in another order.
No, that's fine, however you prefer.
And we met out there with Amy and Teresa, and so we're very confident in the line we've marked, so Teresa will explain that.
Sure. Teresa Sprague with Blue Flax Design. I think you've received our wetland flagging and all of our data sheets.
Want me to hand those out?
Yes, please. We did subsequently go out after our visit with Hamlin Consulting and just rechecked a couple of flags and did a couple of additional plots, vegetation plots and some soils analysis, which I apologize, because of the weather on Monday, we were just able to go out and do it yesterday, which is why you're getting the report at this point. But we come to, I think we can quickly look at our overall observations, and the fact that originally we used vegetation as our main delineation point. We feel confident that our delineation for the wetland based on vegetation is accurate and a little bit conservative. We did go out then subsequently after reviewing the line with Bill and Amy on January 6th. We went back out and met Lim Hanlon from Hamlin Consulting to review the wetland delineation flagging, and you have a copy of her report. On the 14th, we went back out to revisit and analyze the vegetation in flags 1 through 4, where there was some disagreement on the flag placement with Blue Flax Design and Hamlin Consulting. She replaced the flags landward by 2.5 feet, 6.5 feet, 15 feet, and 4 feet respectively. And then yesterday on the 18th, we went out to do a soil analysis. And of course, we had just about 1.25 inches of rain that fell on Monday. So we used a combination of vegetation, hydrology, and soils to make our final recommendation on the wetland delineation, as we've concluded in the report. So you can go through the vegetation, the extending wetland. One thing I do want to remark on is there is a borrow pit extending just to the east of the property boundary that Eastward Companies is looking at. Hamlin Consulting stated that the wetland could continue following the topography of the borrow pit. However, the vegetation present in the borrow pit isn't consistent with the surrounding wetland vegetation. There's American holly, bayberry, oak, saplings dominating the area, which are all upland species. There are a few high bush blueberries present. We were only able to make an observation from a distance because we couldn't go onto the property to do a soils analysis. But we believe that the wetland line would be consistent if it were to continue to wrap around onto that property. It wouldn't follow up the edge of the borrow pit. The topography, of course, is an important factor in wetland delineation, and was used for the movement of flags 1 and 2. The area for flags 3 and 4 are generally flat, so it's not particularly helpful, the topography in that area. Hamlin Consulting noted that there's a thick organic layer, and that was what was used in moving flag number 3 to a more conservative location. In order for the soils to key out there solely as using organic layer, it has to be at least 2 inches thick in conjunction with strong evidence of hydrology and hydrophytic vegetation. And we did include our soils analysis and photographs of that further on. Since, of course, the soils are sandy in this area, it is a little bit more difficult to key out. We took soil samples from a clearly upland area, a very clear wetland area, and to compare the soils at flags 3 and the blue flags and the Hamlin Consulting flags. So in the rest of this report, you'll see our soils observation. We start with an example of the upland soil in an area that's clearly upland that's shown on page 2. We found about 2 inches of leaf litter and about 1 inch of organic layer. The A horizon consisted mostly of sand. Observation in the hydric wetland soils, so we went about 20 feet into the wetland area. You could see that the leaf litter was thinner. The organic layer was about 6 inches of mucky peat, and then we took some photos of that and gave some examples, some resources from Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program Guide for hydric soil wetland delineations. But you can see in the photographs that we've provided, there's clearly a thick mucky peat layer, and it's very consistent with wetland soils. We then did an augering of the flag number 3 at Blue Flax Designs flag, where we've hung the flag number 3, and we found 2 inches of leaf litter, 6 inches of organic material that was augured after we moved the leaf litter aside, so beginning at about a depth of 2 inches. We did find hydric soil indicators where we placed our flag. We observed a peat organic layer with also lower sand content, higher dark clay content, holding its shape when held, and some anaerobic conditions present. Then we did a final augering at flag number 3, where Hamlin Consulting put their flag at 15 feet landward. What we found was an organic layer, about 2 inches of leaf litter. We found about 2 inches in the O horizon of partially decomposed leaves and some peat. And the A horizon consistent of light brown loose sand with no hydric soil indicators present, which is more similar to the upland soils we observed. In addition to that, we did vegetation plots for each of those flags, which are also included in this plan, and they're mini. I apologize, you need a magnifying glass to read them, so I can get them to you in digital form so that they're easier for you to read. That showed that the flags, the Blue Flax design flags key out appropriately, and the landward flags don't key out as wetland vegetation. So I feel confident that the flagging that we did is appropriate. I feel it's even a little bit conservative throughout the area, but is appropriate for this particular wetland, is accurate, and appropriately affects appropriately indicates the wetland conditions on site.
Thank you. So, Hamlin Consulting, Lynn, who's here, also raised the possibility that the pond there is a vernal pond. It's not certified, but I'd like Dave Clark, who's on remotely, just to explain if it were a vernal pond, or vernal pool, how that would affect our request for a negative determination. Dave, are you with us? Dave Clark.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Now you can hear me. Good. David Clark, for the record, Clark Engineering. So looking at the whether this is a vernal pool or not. Kind of doesn't make a difference in that the more restrictive resource area is the vegetated wetland under the local regulation. So in most all instances, the limits of the vernal pool would be towards the standing water from the edge of the flagged wetland. So the 100-foot 50 and 100-foot buffers that are shown on the plan would be the most restrictive jurisdictional lines for this resource area. And if it is a vernal pool, then there would be no buffer zone under the Wetlands Protection Act, and any activity within 100 feet of it would be strictly a local application. Be happy to answer any questions on the plan.
Well, I have a question for you, Dave. So, where would the 100-foot line be from the pool, vernal pool, if it were a vernal pool? Would it be closer?
Well, we would
closer to our design road, or further away from our design road?
Well, it would be further away. Exactly where, I would have to work with Teresa to determine where the seasonal high water mark would be, and that would be where you would start measuring the vernal pool habitat under the local bylaw. Again, it would be towards the resource area from the flagged vegetated wetland.
Excuse me, if I could just jump in. My name is Jacqueline Childs. I own a home on Hidden Pond Circle. It's my understanding a vernal pool would suggest that for a good amount of the year that...
Let me interrupt you for just a moment. We're going to take questions from other participants later on once we complete the presentation and get commissioners' comments, if you don't mind waiting.
No problem, of course not.
All right, thank you very much. Any other?
Oh, I think we're done with our presentation, unless you have anything else. We believe that a negative determination would be appropriate in these circumstances.
All right, thank you. Amy, do you have any comments?
Yep, so first, I know that you were pinched on time and weather, so the commission does not need to feel like it needs to review all this documentation on the spot tonight. The commission could request a continuation of this hearing purely to review the new information given and to give other people who might be interested the opportunity to review that information as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That being said, since we are in a public hearing and I've reviewed the site, I'd like to take the opportunity to ask questions and comments. I did have the chance to walk the delineation with Teresa and Brittany from Blue Flax, as well as Bill. And then after that, have been speaking with Lynn Hamlin of Hamlin Consulting as well. Today, I did with some of the commissioners, when we did site visits, I went out and looked at the comparison of your two wetland delineations that are flagged out there. And my review based on soils and plants that I looked at when we were out there is that my belief is that my professional opinion, I should say, is more consistent with the flagging from Blue Flax design. Particularly focused, dug a little bit extra around that flag 3, which was the one that seemed to be most off between the two delineations. And my results came back similar to what you were just describing in plot 3. I think plot 1 is more Hamlin Consulting's flag, but the difference there is small to begin with. So I still want to have a chance to review this new information more too, because it's not just, a one-page thing. It's in depth with your plants. But that is up to the chair and the commission if you want to take all this under advisement and continue for that, or proceed tonight if you feel comfortable with the hearing or the determination. In regards to the vernal pool, I do see the value in having it investigated. Having that vetted this spring, when you would typically look at vernal pool indicators to do so. Even if, we cannot say for certain where that line is right now. So when you ask where that vernal pool habitat line would be on this plan, while we think it's probably gonna be more towards the water than the 100-foot buffer to the edge of wetland, which is a different thing, we can't be certain exactly, we don't know where that is. What it does in the future is it would overall, meaning that little pond, hidden pond, would be more closely scrutinized for activities proposed around it by the commission, making sure that those activities on this parcel and others is just more closely scrutinized to make sure it's not having an impact to that habitat. So I think the commission, you're asking for a determination of a wetland line, that's one thing, but then the requirement to do a vernal pool study for this spring would be a separate requirement in a letter that we would submit, or that we would issue with the determination.
All right, thank you.
So,
Unless any of the commissioners have an objection, I would suggest that we do continue this hearing to a later meeting so that we can review the information that we were given tonight. But at the same time, if you have any preliminary questions that you might like to present, I think it at least would give our proponents an opportunity to address them at the next meeting when they come back. So with that, let me open it up to commissioners that are on the phone, starting with Mark. Do you have any questions or comments?
I do support the continuance of this to review it further, but I am curious about the square footage of the wetland space per house lot that's laid out. I mean, I'm seeing a 50-foot diameter circle on each one, but to me, that's a little bit inconclusive. But come up with a square footage of what the suggested wetland area is on each lot, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Well, there's no wetland on any of the lots. The
Mark,
circle,
yeah.
the circle is only there to show, it's a shape requirement of the zoning bylaw. It's just there to show that, you know, the 50-foot circle fits inside the lot. So that's the purpose of the circle. There is no wetland in any of the lots.
So for our purpose. Okay.
My apologies. I don't have all the information. Please accept my apology on that question.
No problem, no problem.
Thank you, Mark. Stan, do you have any comments, questions?
You can also type his comments in, and I can read, like, that's another way to do it.
Did you hear that, Stan? If you wanted to type in questions or comments?
Can you hear me over the phone?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. I was just trying the mic, and I don't know why it's not working. I vote to continue.
All righty, good, thank you. John, comments, questions?
Yeah, first of all, if Amy could now or later show us where this material is, because I don't see it in Dropbox, any new material. So I do, not having seen it, I do support continuing. I also support further investigation of the wetland for its status as a vernal pool and being able to delimit the vernal pool in an objective way. I also have one very minor point, which is there's a problem with the contour labeling around flags 1 through 4, where one end of contour has one value and the other end another value. You might want to correct that before you bring it back. I don't think it's material, but just a little one. Other than that, nothing.
All right. Thank you, John. Alan, any comments, questions?
No comment.
All right, thanks, Alan. Jim?
No, I do support the position of continuing the hearing tonight so that Amy, the commission, and anybody else who has an interest has a chance to review the information that has just been presented to us.
Thank you. Brad?
No comments.
All right. Wayne, do you have any questions or comments on this?
No, not on this one.
The only, well, one comment, on the site plan that I have, it doesn't show the flags, so I know you showed us one at the site that did show them.
Yeah, we got them after I delivered your packets, so the correct one is also in your Dropbox now.
Oh, okay, all right.
But we can get you more full-size copies prior
Yes.
to the next meeting.
That'd be helpful, I think, for the next meeting, if we get into that discussion. And then just as a point of clarification, the discussion between vernal pools and regulated wetlands. The vernal pool, if I'm understanding you correctly, is within the wetland that you're showing on this.
It would be, yes.
And by treating it as a wetland, it essentially obviates any impact from the vernal pool, because the wetland would have a greater, or we would have greater jurisdiction over the wetland, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Well, you have created, it expands the area of your jurisdiction from the wetland. In other words, so we begin measuring your area of jurisdiction from the landward edge of the BVW.
Right.
And if it's a vernal pool, your jurisdiction is then measured from the edge of the, I think David said the high water.
It's inside of that wetland area.
Right.
Entirely inside of it.
Right, and so that would move the jurisdictional line further away from our proposed road.
Right, okay.
I would just say, you still have a bordering vegetated wetland, so it doesn't move the jurisdictional line away. You still have that 100-foot buffer zone from edge of bordering vegetated wetland. You just have another line for edge of vernal pool habitat.
Okay.
So you're not gaining more upland or buffer or anything
Correct.
like that.
That's, yes.
I misunderstood David.
Okay, good.
It's up to you if you want to take comments from the audience.
Yes, at this point, anyone in the audience have questions or comments? Like to hear them at this juncture.
Ben has one.
Lynn Hamlin, I'm representing, electrocuted, representing several abutters. We always say a wetland line. Can you hear me? You know I'm having issues with masks and microphones. A wetland line is not a line, it's a width. And I know Teresa does a good job flagging a wetland. And when I went and looked at it, a lot of it's just professional differences. And I would put my flags, those are the only ones that I would even adjust. And it was based on my standards of delineation. And people see test holes differently. We joked about that on site. Men and women see test hole colors differently. Women and women see test hole colors differently. But it was just a consideration of where I thought the wetland line needed to be adjusted. But I think the wetland line, the information you have, you can make that decision on which wetland line you'd like to approve. I think more significant is where that wetland pivots off from the property line. And because both the contours and the wetland edge stop right at the property line, you can't see how there's a we think it's an old borrow pit that is a very low elevation. And I see that differently. I see that as predominantly wetland shrub indicators. And we could, I think it's fine, you get permission from the property owner, the three of us could go resolve that issue together, go dig a hole, do a soils and plant analysis, because if that wetland does follow that edge of the borrow pit, it's going to drag the buffer zone significantly into that property. So I think that's an important thing to determine, and I'd be happy to try to facilitate a meeting and save everybody time, and I'm sure we'll all agree.
Okay.
So I think that's important. As far as the vernal pool goes, I think that's very significant in that Harwich has a unique bylaw that does not require vernal pool habitat to be located within already existing wetland area. Under the state, vernal pool habitat only extends as far as it is located within another wetland resource area. Harwich does not have that qualifier in there. So Harwich's 100-foot habitat extension from the edge of the vernal pool can be over upland. As a matter of fact, it becomes its own resource area. It's not a buffer to it, it is a resource area. So I think that it is very important to confirm whether or not there is a vernal pool there. So you might look at a project more strictly. It does not have a buffer zone, but the 100-foot becomes a resource area. On their form, I don't know if it was an oversight or whether it was intentional, they do not check the box asking for jurisdiction under the bylaw. They just ask under the state law. They're really only asking for wetland confirmation or a negative determination under the state act. If you look on the plan, they're asking for a negative determination to avoid filing a notice of intent. I think it's significant to note that even on their plan, they showed some drainage features, which are not totally spec'd out, it's just a basic plan, in your jurisdiction. There's no work limit line, so you already sort of assume a 10-foot disturbance area for a single-family dwelling construction. I would imagine a road construction would cause you to need a bigger area to work. So that's not on a plan. Lot 1, the buffer zone comes into Lot 1. I have a little tiny plan I just looked at. So you clearly have jurisdiction over a lot of this project. So I'm a little confused how you could issue a negative determination. I think you have to, you're being asked to confirm a wetland line with a 100-foot buffer, a possible vernal pool with an associated vernal pool habitat, and at the same time being asked to issue a negative determination. I don't think those two things go together. Of significance is the fact that this whole property is both estimated in priority habitat as mapped by Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. The only way you get to have oversight over that resource as estimated habitat is if the applicant files a notice of intent. If they file a determination, if they don't file anything, you don't get to have any say in that. By requiring them to file a notice of intent, they have to file, or they can file simultaneously with Natural Heritage, and you have to include Natural Heritage's conditions in your order of conditions. And I think it's, oversight is going to be better from a local commission than from the state that's not located on Cape Cod. So by issuing a negative determination, you let go of that. You don't have any oversight over endangered species. In this, because of the habitat nature, you have a pond, you have a possible vernal pool, you have a really cool meadow out there, and it's a nice swath of forested upland that's contiguous with a lot of land. And the road in there is going to cause impact to wildlife habitat largely outside your jurisdiction, but a significant abutting a very sensitive wildlife habitat area that I think you should not lose the opportunity to oversee. I think that's very important. So I think that the wetland edge can be easily resolved. And you could approve a wetland edge. It doesn't mean you're approving either a vernal pool or lack of one. You can approve strictly what they ask for. But I think as far as area of jurisdiction, you need to know where it extends beyond the flag number 1. And then you do need to have a vernal pool assessment before a project gets approved. And I do believe that you should have to, or the applicant should be required to file a notice of intent with work limit lines and the full drainage design and everything that goes along with construction of a subdivision. And I will stop talking now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn.
Looks like we have maybe Attorney Sunny.
Yeah, any other comments from the audience? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much for recognizing me. My name is Christopher Senni. I'm an attorney. I live and have an office at Brewster. And I was asked to represent 3 property owners, two of whom abut the subject property. One is very close. My clients are identified at the bottom of a letter I sent to the commission on December 23rd. But they are Linda and John Burns, who live at 1119 Orleans Road, and Will and Lisa Martin, who live at 14 Hidden Pond Circle, and Trevor and Jocelyn Childs at 52 Hidden Pond Circle. I appreciate your professional staff. Both Amy and Melissa have been very easy to work with and very friendly as I've tried to get my bearings to represent my clients. And my clients decided to hire Lynn, who just spoke, so that we had our own wetland specialist take a look at the property and the wetland flagging. And that was very helpful. And with the help of Attorney Riley, we were given permission to go on the property. And we appreciate that very much. And as Lynn just said, the delineation of the wetlands is probably very doable here. There's a little bit of variation in where the 2 experts might put the flags, but not very much. And I'm sure the commission can delineate these wetlands. My clients understand that once that's done, that will be valid for 3 years. The harder part of this application is the part that asks you to sign off on your jurisdiction by issuing a negative determination of applicability. The applicant believes that they can show you that there will be no work within your jurisdiction, but it's very, very close. There's a lot of construction. As Lynn just said, we don't have a grading and drainage plan. And the road will come very close to the 100-foot buffer. And there are reasons your commission would benefit from the filing of a notice of intent and have an opportunity to really make sure that resources are fully protected here. The Wetland Protection Act does speak, or the regulations promulgated under that act, at 310 CMR 3A1 of an application for a request for determination for work that may affect your jurisdictional area. And I think here there's a pretty good chance that there may be some work that would affect the area that falls under your jurisdiction. So we ask that you take a close look at this question and consider the resources. We do favor a continuation so that we can read the package of material that just came in. And I identified it in my December 23rd letter, another issue which may or may not impact your deliberation, but it has to do with Middle Road, which is the only way my clients, Linda and John Burns at 1119 Orleans Road, gain access to their property. And this ancient way, which has been here since before the Civil War, is conflicting with the proposed subdivision road right at the location where the 2 would come off of Route 39. And this way not be discontinued without the permission of those who have a right in that way. And based on what was said by the applicant to the planning board, it appears that there might actually be an intention of trying to discontinue this way. I think it runs to the question of whether the applicant has full control over the land that it's presenting to you. I plan to take this up with, I've already alerted Attorney Riley that this is a concern, and I will take this up when this subdivision plan gets back to the planning board. But I am concerned that there hasn't been any treatment of how this new proposed subdivision road will intersect with a very long-standing and used way that should be maintained. Those are the extent of my comments. Again, I appreciate having a chance to speak for my clients. A number of them are in attendance virtually tonight, and we will come back when this is rescheduled if it is, and we'll participate fully. Thank you very much.
One question before we let you go, Attorney Sammy. With respect to the middle road, are you suggesting that that is a Conservation Commission issue?
I don't know myself. If the commission typically asks an applicant to show that they control their property and their access to it, it might, but it is likely much more an issue that should be taken up with the planning board, which we will do.
I agree. All right, thank you. Let me ask if there are any other audience members that would like to comment on this proposal. All right, good.
Mr. Chairman, briefly.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes?
Excuse me, Ernie. I just have a question. Attorney Sunny referred to a December 23rd letter that he sent to the commission, I think, and I don't see that in Dropbox.
We'll check that.
Okay, I just like to make sure I get to see that,
I
yes.
apologize if that was the case. It was not intentional.
Well, I think at the next hearing that we have on this, there'll be a number of additional documents that'll be part of the presentation that we'll have an opportunity to look at, as well as the public. I think anyone that's interested at that point.
Yeah, well, sorry about that. It didn't make it in Dropbox. I don't know why. We will get that to you.
All right. Yes, you had other comments, Bill?
Well, yeah, just very briefly, I think the Conservation Commission is a very busy organization and have a lot of responsibility, all of which we acknowledge. I think the fact that some of the proposed work is very close to the 100-foot buffer is an indication of why the negative determination is appropriate. The the idea of an order of conditions, of course, is to impose conditions that allow the work to continue in a manner that protects the wetland values of your bylaw and the State Wetlands Protection Act. And so looking at the plan that's been presented, as well as the new, the one that Amy's got that shows the flagging locations, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that the proposed road is outside your jurisdiction, and the drainage structures are outside your jurisdiction, we're happy to mark the jurisdictional line to be certain that no construction takes place or no excavation takes place. Goes into your jurisdiction. But I think the idea that the commission, which is a busy organization, would take a significant amount of time to deal with a road construction that is outside your jurisdiction, with the possible exception of excavation related to a drainage structure. With all due respect to Ms. Hamlin, I think it's a waste of your time and your staff's time. But we'll be back in your next meeting and talk about it again.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other follow-up questions from commissioners? One question or comment I have, again, we talked about the flags, and Amy, you said you have an updated plan that shows the location of those. There was also mention of a borrow pit in the discussion. If you could show that on this plan as well. And
On our property.
it's not on your property?
No.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression it was.
If you remember, Lisa in her presentation commented that she had looked at the vegetation on it, but hadn't gone into the borrow pit or onto the borrow pit area because it's not our property.
Fine, okay. Yes, Lynn?
We can get permission, I'm sure, we can get permission to go onto that property, and I'd like to get together to dig a hole there just to put that to bed. But I'm sure it's easily attainable to get permission to get the information you need to know how much jurisdiction extends on the locus site.
If you feel it'll have an impact on our consideration, then yeah.
Potentially drag that 100-foot buffer significantly inland.
Okay. And then any other sensitive areas that were either discussed tonight or, yes, sir?
Hi, John Burns. I do own that property. You absolutely have permission.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Jack?
All right. So it sounds like we will have this back at our next meeting, hopefully?
That's February 2nd. We would need all new materials a week from today, though.
More comment.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, is this open out to the public for comment?
Yes, it is.
All right. All right, my name is Sharon Flieger, and just for all purposes, I am on the Board of Health, but this has nothing to do with the Board of Health. I happen to be in a butter. I live on Little Shaver Lane. And I'm not sure that the question really is for you people in conservation or whether it belongs in planning. When they put our plan together for Little Shaver Lane, we had to put Lot 7, and I don't know how many of you are going to be familiar with Lot 7 that goes totally around all the homes. That Lot 7 had to be there for nitrogen purposes for the drainage into Nantucket Sound. So what I was told was that the amount of acreage for Lot 7 depended on the billable land that the homes were on. Am I making sense? She's shaking her head yes. Okay. My question is on this plan, and I know the road there is going to come right up against our boundary to Lot 7. And I see that there is 2 little open spaces that I'm assuming are going to be for nitrogen, because I'm assuming that area is going to have, is going to be nitrogen sensitive, the same as what ours is. My question is there, by the square footage that's going to be used for this development, is there something set aside for that nitrogen in this development as there was for our development?
That would be a question for the planning board and the health department, actually, because it's not conservation. We can't require you to set aside land to offset. That's more of a nitrogen.
So that's going to be planning board.
Planning board, and it'll probably also be discussed during Board of Health as
All right,
well.
all right, because I kind of thought possibly with the water,
Yeah.
wastewater.
It makes sense to be in conservation, but no, that is
It's not. All right, then I will save it for, I'll save it for the planning board, so thank you very much.
They'll
Okay,
have to
thank you.
They'll have to show that they have enough amount of square footage of upland to do this.
Okay, and there will be a planning board hearing yet on this?
They have to go back for the subdivision, so yes.
So yes, okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
Is February 2nd with an agreeable next date, and all new information supplied by Wednesday of next week? Okay?
Is that adequate time for you to?
Hang on one second, let him confer.
This is David Clark speaking. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can, David.
You have the Susan Ledoux filed the revised plan showing the wetland flags. It also shows where the standing water was in late last year. We will not have time to locate the borrow pit on the abutting lot. Frankly, I don't see how it impacts the project at all, in that where we show the proposed road is more than 100 feet from our easterly property line. And the borrow pit is not on the subject property. So even if the wetland vegetation was found right on the property line, we're more than 100 feet from that easterly property line. And in regards to other boards, when this project is fully designed, it will have to go back. It will go back to the planning board for subdivision review. We will go to the Board of Health for approval of a nitrogen aggregation plan, as well as an environmental impact review, which has to do with the nitrogen. The fact that there's open space around the abutting subdivision has nothing to do with nitrogen. It is simply creating open space that's in perpetuity protected from development. And we're going to have the same thing in this project. I think we're getting close to 60% open space. Is that what we show, Susan? Just nod your head. So that's the benefit of an open space subdivision, is that you create these buffers to wetland resource areas that are protected from development for perpetuity. And finally, because of the size of the subdivision, the subdivision will also require a stormwater permit that's issued by the selectmen. And the project has to comply with both the Massachusetts stormwater policy and EPA construction stormwater permit. And so the very last permit we will get for this project will be an EPA stormwater permit. So there are a lot of hoops to jump through. Nearly all of them are environmental permits, with exception of the subdivision. So there's going to be a lot of oversight locally before this project can go forward. But I just want to reiterate that we will not be able to get a plan to you showing the borrow pit on the abutting property by next Wednesday.
Well, I was never offering to survey their property.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so Teresa can go out with Lynn Hamlin and identify the soils and plants, but that's all we're going to do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Sam.
So that's my understanding as well, that we would go out and look at it. However, if it is found to be contiguous with the wetland here, you don't not put a wetland or a buffer zone on a property just because it's, it's a jurisdictional area. You don't just not put it there because it's not on your property, or.
No, I understand that. I'm not saying we won't. What I'm saying is we won't survey their property, but if there's wetlands found there, we'll change the location of the jurisdiction.
The buffer zones.
Yeah, on our property.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we'd still need time.
You would still need to have you'd still need to have them put it on a plan.
Right
after you've done your work.
So I would recommend to do the 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to go out there and take a look at it. May or may not even rise to the level of needing to be changed on the plan. So I don't see the downside of continuing just to February 2nd at this point.
Okay. Good. Can we have a motion then to that effect?
Yeah, I will
Mr.
move.
Chairman,
Yes.
Yes,
I just have one last question,
Yes.
if I may. So one of the comments that Mr. Clark just made was that one of the final steps in permitting is getting a stormwater permit, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that applies to all the drainage that's shown on this plan for the road. And so we can, and I'm also concluding from that, that what's shown for drainage here is only preliminary. This is not a final design. So we don't in fact know whether the drainage you're going to be requiring inside or outside conservation jurisdictional area. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that is the main purpose of filing this request for determination, is so we know what line we're designing to. I haven't begun to design the road because I don't know what my constraints are for where to place drainage and how to grade the road. So we can't really move forward with any of the construction details till we have a jurisdictional line that we know is valid.
No, you're all set?
Thank you.
Okay. Good. So can we have the motion?
Okay. I will move that we continue the hearing on the request for determination of applicability for 0 Route 39/Orleans Road, map 63, parcel C3, until February 2nd, 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Seconded. All in favor of the roll call online? Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Stan, are you still on?
Aye.
Thank you. Jim?
Aye.
Aye. Brad? Aye. And I am an aye, so it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2, for relocation of a driveway, installation of a new shed, and plantings.
Good evening. Phil Cheney, landscape designer representing the Dohertys, the owner of this property. I believe Nancy Doherty is present on phone if necessary. But I think it's a really good project that we're presenting before you, where the Dohertys purchased this property about a year ago that had recently been rebuilt. The driveway from the original property was left in the same position that it has been historically, which incidentally runs right along the edge of the north property line, right very close to an existing bordering vegetated wetland. Now, the owners have had some frustration with the gravel driveway in entering the garage. It's a little bit steep and loose there. Not very happy with that. So we come up with this proposal to use dry laid permeable pavers in front of the driveway and then reorient the driveway to get it as quickly outside of the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction as we can. So we have the bordering vegetated wetland on the north side along that property line. We also have the Herring River. We have a 100-foot buffer zone from the river as well as a 200-foot riverfront line which intersect on the property. But if you look at the plan presented, we're looking at eliminating all of the hardscape, all of the gravel driveway within the 0 to 50-foot buffer, and keeping the rest of the driveway on the 50 to 100-foot buffer and exiting as quickly as we can and getting outside of your jurisdiction and cleanly out back onto the main street, Chase Street. So in lieu of that, we're proposing actually a slightly less amount of paving, hard pavers right outside of the garage for the parking and turnaround, and then transitioning back to the gravel for the remainder through the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone. There are a few trees that would be lost in that process. All of them are generally in the 4-inch caliper range, roughly. A couple of larger pitch pines, say in the 10-inch caliper range. Those we're replacing, we're revegetating the entire area of the existing driveway. So all the gravel would be excavated from there. Some topsoil will be brought in to restore the grade to a natural condition. Replant it, we've got a total of, let's see, I've got 11 native tree species being planted in that zone, as well as a whole number of native shrubs that you see. We've got, although the note there to just sort of, for a one-time application of some bark mulch to help stabilize that area and keep the invasives from coming in quickly while the new plantings get established. So we also are including a proposed shed, a 12 by 16-foot shed, which is outside of the 100-foot buffer zones, but does fall within the 200-foot riverfront jurisdiction. As far as the riverfront goes, while we're over the requirement of a 10% disturbance, the project will actually result in a reduction in disturbance within the 200-foot river zone act. So I think that meets that standard very well. So overall, we're reducing in the 100-foot buffer 1,440 square feet. And then it's a small 55 square foot reduction in the riverfront area. But I think this would be a good project that'll solve a lot of problems for both the homeowner and be a great improvement for the resource area to the north. Any questions?
Great, thank you. Amy, do you have any comments on this?
Sure. In general, I think this is a very positive project. Currently, you have disturbance about 10 feet away from that isolated vegetated wetland, and that's the driveway. And to get rid of that driveway, which is a constant need of maintenance, gravel's always kind of pushing off to the sides as trucks go in, really close to the wetland. I think abandoning that and revegetating it with what you've proposed will be a great thing for that wetland. Provide more of a buffer, definitely more species diversity, stability, habitat, etc. You do have a net reduction overall, but both in the 100-foot buffer to the top of coastal bank as well as the riverfront area. The reason this project was above the 10% rule to begin with a couple years ago was because the original house that was there a couple of years ago, an associated driveway, landscape features, and cottage that was on the site, square footage wise was actually more than what's there. What was the most, then we decreased a little bit, and now they're decreasing the hardscape disturbance a little bit more. So the questions the commission and myself had, the foundation for the proposed shed would be sonotubes. There was a question about the installation of the pavers to make sure they're absolutely pervious. To my knowledge, based on seeing the owner at the site today, they're not set on a specific product at this point in time, and that's what Phil also had said in his email to me, but the commission could dictate in their conditions, what the base or, the permeability needs to be to meet that. I would agree with, in this instance, normally I'm not in too much favor of mulch because it tends to just become continuation of landscaped areas. This wouldn't. There would be no aesthetic real benefit for that owner to keep adding mulch to that area. It's 1 to 2 inches. It would be native bark mulch, free of dyes and chemicals, and strictly a one-time installation of that. And I think it will certainly, for the trees in particular, help them establish a little bit better, as well as keep some of those invasives, which are along the ring of the isolated wetland, from cropping up there immediately. They'll have to be monitored over time to make sure they don't creep in, because they'll want to. So no, I have typical conditions I would recommend is the no which was on the previous permit, the no chemical application, no fertilizers, including organics. They could do temporary drip irrigation to all the new plantings. With that, I would recommend approval. And with the specifications, the commission can tell me better about what conditions we should put on for the permeability of the pavers.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, comments from the commissioners. Brad, you want to start?
Sure, a couple of minor comments. First one, would a condition to remove the mulch be the way to deal with the temporary nature of the mulch, or to have it covered over?
No, it'll just, 1 or 2 inches of native mulch will decompose on its own pretty
Okay.
quickly.
Okay, so maybe a condition of no additional applications.
One time,
Okay.
yeah, no additional.
Yep. And then for my own education, when it comes to the riverfront area, is there any requirement to bring down that coverage below the 10%, or is it considered grandfathered? What's the language in the riverfront area?
So Riverfront is 1996, and the house that was here prior to this house, which was over the 10%, that house predated Rivers
Yep.
Act, so it does grandfather it in a fashion, if you will.
Yep.
And because they're reducing, I mean, it's great that they're reducing, but that they're not required
Okay.
technically to reduce.
Okay. Yeah, I think otherwise it's a nice layout. The plantings look really good. Thank you.
Jim?
I have no further comment.
Wayne, do you have any questions?
My only comment is anytime you can make a project better, I'm all for it. You know, it's better than what's there now, as far as the driveway goes. Get it away from that isolated wetland, be fine in my book.
Mark, comments, questions?
Nope, I agree. Overall, it's a benefit. But I would like to see the order of conditions state that the pavers are engineered permeable. Thank you.
Okay. John?
No comments, thank you.
Stanley?
No comment.
Okay, thanks. Alan?
Looks good. Good luck.
Okay, good. I have no comments or questions either on this. As people have said, I think it is a vast improvement on the property, and I think it looks good what's been presented. So with that, any questions, comments from the audience? All right, hearing none, could we have a motion, please?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the notice of intent for 20 Chase Street, map 4, parcel N2-2, with the condition that all pavers used on the site be permittable.
Okay, thank you. I have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Brad. Roll call on the vote then. Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so it passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm really disappointed I didn't have an audience. I figured everybody was here for me.
They're all online.
We're
Nobody
here
have the
for the
time.
bylaw.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep.
Great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the public hearing. For the last number of years, the Conservation Commission has been working on drafting changes to our, the Harwich Wetland Protection Bylaw, Chapter 310 of the Code of the Town of Harwich, as well as the Harwich Water Dependent Structures Bylaw, which is Chapter 304 of the Code of the Town of Harwich. We have presented the proposal, the draft proposal to the Board of Selectmen, and they have agreed to place it on the warrant for the May 2022 Harwich Town Meeting. Again, this proposal is contingent on approval by the citizens of the town that attend the town meeting. So nothing is etched in stone at this point. The purpose of today's presentation is to give interested parties an overview of the proposed changes that we have drafted, and entertain any comments that the public might have on the changes that we're presenting tonight. So with that, let's start with the proposed changes to the Harwich Wetlands Protection Bylaw. The first item on the presentation, you can see it on the screen, is to decrease the size of a regulated wetland from the existing 3,000 square feet to 1,000 square feet. We felt that this was consistent with the regulatable wetland size in other area towns. We considered a number of alternatives to that, even at one point going down to 500 square feet, but decided that it was perhaps too small, and looked at what other towns were regulating and determined that 1,000 was probably more appropriate than the 3,000 that we presently have. And the purpose is to better project our small wetland resource area, better protect our small wetland resource areas, which are really important. A lot of these wetland areas are vernal pools, which may or may not be certified, but nonetheless, vernal pools are extremely important parts of our infrastructure, our environment that we have. There are creatures and flora and fauna that are in the vernal pools that you would not find in a typical wetland area. So we felt it's really important that we protect a lot of the small ones. In addition to that, I think one of the considerations that we gave to this change was just taking a sort of a step back and looking at the changes going on in the town. As all of us know, I think, there's been a tremendous building boom in Harwich. And that increased building has just put a tremendous pressure on our resource areas. So having the smaller definition to the regulated wetlands gives us the ability to help prevent or protect, I should say, more of those sensitive and important wetland areas. So that's the background on that. What I would suggest we do, we'll go through the different changes, and then if you have questions at the end, we'll be more than happy to address them. Next section that's up on the screen is we added some additional definitions to the bylaw. So the buffer zone is the jurisdictional area extending landward of 100 feet from the wetland resource area. As is noted here, the land subject to coastal storm flowage and the riverfront area don't have any buffer zones under this bylaw. We also added a definition for cumulative impact, and we'll talk more about this and how it's affecting some of the decisions that we make. But one of the concerns that we have is we'll often be presented with a project to make a change that will impact a protected area. And we have to look not only at the effect of that one particular project that we're considering, but also other projects that might be contiguous to it. And it's not just that one sole issue, but we looked at the cumulative impact of a project. Let's take, for example, a dock or water-dependent structure. It's not only the impact on salt marsh, it could be an impact from scouring, it can be an impact to shellfish. So there are a number of different issues that we take into consideration. So we've added this definition just to make sure that people understand that it's a consideration that we do have. So proposed additional definitions also include mitigation. As noted here, there's numbers of different forms of mitigation that we can entertain for impacts to wetland resource areas. But most importantly, one of the newest ones that we've sort of added to our arsenal here is in lieu fees. So in certain situations, we will have proposals to, for example, construct a house on a virgin lot where there has been no construction before. And obviously, the impact of that construction is going to detract from the natural resources on that lot. So it's very difficult to mitigate for the impact on the existing lot because it's already in its native form. So this gives us the opportunity to assess fees that we can then use on other important projects in town that are sensitive to our goals and gives us the ability to approve more projects that we're presented with that we might otherwise have issues with as far as being able to appropriately mitigate them. The next item that's on the definitions, the mitigation constrained sites. Again, I think we just talked about that that sort of native forest site that someone is going to put a house on, you can't do any mitigation on that. So we've added the definition to say that that would be a mitigation constrained site and gives us the opportunity to perhaps do the mitigation off-site on some other project. The next item, and I don't know if we can, well, we'll get back to it. Oh, there it is. Okay, it's up there. 60-foot, no new structure zone. In the past, we've had a 50-foot boundary is our principal area of concern. It's a no disturb zone around a wetland area. What we found was that many times we'd get projects and proposals that would build right up to that 50-foot zone, 50-foot boundary. And as a result of that, you would have traffic that would go into the 50-foot zone and create disturbances and everything else. So what we've decided to do is propose a 60-foot no new structure zone. And what that does is it gives us a 10-foot buffer from the 50-foot no disturb zone so that any traffic, foot traffic, building disturbance, anything like that can take place in that 60-foot zone, and it will allow us to better preserve the 50-foot no disturb zone. Moving on, the next two definitions we have, shellfish. We've added in a couple of different species of shellfish to the definition that we had previously. I think oysters was one of them, perhaps. Yes. Periwinkles, perhaps, but nonetheless, this is a more comprehensive definition of what is considered to be mollusks and shellfish. And then variance. Oftentimes when we're asked to approve a project, then we'll do so, but require a variance, just to make certain that the proposed activity doesn't have an adverse impact on the resource area, buffer zone, or any of the interests that are associated with those. The final two changes we have gets back to the, in part, to the in lieu fees. Many times when we have projects come before us and we need additional information, we need additional resources from outside experts to assess the impact that the project might have on our wetland resource areas, we're at a loss to how to pay for those experts to come in. So this gives us the ability to ask an applicant to bring in an outside expert for a particular focus that we may identify on a project, and also absorb the costs associated with that experts. And finally, the last item on that slide also just goes to the payment of that consultant fee and when it would be payable to the town, for example. The last items on here, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. They help just strengthen our ability to charge fees based on the information that we feel is necessary to approve a project or to consider a decision on a project. And if there is any excess fee that's remaining from anything that's charged, then we would refund that back to the individual. That's it on the wetland protection bylaw changes that we are proposing for inclusion in the town warrant. I'd like to open it up at this point to any comments, questions, concerns that people may have with respect to those particular changes, and then we'll move on to the water-dependent structure bylaw changes that we're proposing. So with that, I'll open it up. Anybody have any comments or questions or concerns? We must have done a good job in drafting that then.
I have a question. This is Pam Newbert here.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know would it be possible to put the species names, the scientific names to the species and the shellfish, just so we know what your idea of a periwinkle is a periwinkle. This is coming from somebody, I do surveys and I want to make sure that I address the correct species. Is that something that you might consider?
We can add the scientific names very easily.
Sure, I think that's a good change. And anything that's more descriptive and eliminates any potential future confusion, I think is worthwhile. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for considering. That's all for me here.
All right, thank you. Other comments?
Through the chair, it's Don Monroe from Coastal Engineering.
Yeah.
How are you folks tonight?
Good, how are you?
Got quite an audience. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
When we go to the next section, will we be able to come back to this cumulative impact section, or do we have to make comments on that now? Only because we might have in the next section a reason to come back to the cumulative impact. So I just don't want to miss an opportunity to make a comment, but also want to follow whatever protocol you've set up for this venue.
No, I mean, we just want an open and full discussion on this, Don. So if you feel that you have some comments that would pertain to these when we get into the water-dependent structures, and that's fine.
Okay. Well, I'll just make something brief about the cumulative impact, because maybe later when you're covering the others, you'll probably maybe answer my comment. When you talk or you define the cumulative impact, it seems like a good definition, although I was wondering if the commission has had their own experts or input from other sources as to the science that might be behind what would classify a cumulative impact. And that may come up later. So I just want to throw it out there now in case there's some case studies or things like that. And I think it's probably more related to docks than anything else, but I'm sure it can be related to other portions of projects that might have a quote cumulative impact to the resource areas. So just, I think us as professionals that do have some clients that are on and listening, just want to be sure that we fully understand what the commission's trying to accomplish, which we appreciate, because like Bill Riley said previously, you folks are working a lot and have a heavy load. So we appreciate that. So having made that comment, it would be nice to know if there are documents that are beyond just the written documents here that are the actual definitions and bylaw changes that we could that you could share with us.
I can address that if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don, in terms of the definition, it really is a point of just laying down a definition for cumulative impacts, and it's not related to any specific studies that we have. So I think that answers your question fairly straightforwardly, that there are no particular studies that connect with that definition.
Okay.
If I may.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may, really quickly, the particular studies would really be project, that we would reference would be project specific. So when an application came in front of us and we were discussing cumulative adverse impact at that point in time, is when certain studies that either the commission or the applicants have would come into play to look at cumulative impacts, but it wouldn't be something we would put in the definitions.
You know, I always like to give examples on some of these things too, and we had a presentation at one of our prior meetings where, actually it was a series of meetings that we had to discuss the proposal that we were entertaining. And after the first meeting, we identified a number of different issues with it that I thought were very, very well addressed in the second meeting, because at that point the proponent brought in experts that could address issues like, in this particular case, it had to do with a walkway over Marsh, and the proponents brought in a marsh expert from University of New Hampshire, I think it was, that was just outstanding as far as describing what he saw as impacts from this project. He brought in the builder who did a very good job of describing how he would actually construct this walkway. And I mean, overall, you know, we had a number of concerns that I would have put under the definition of cumulative impacts, and each one of them was addressed separately by the individuals that they brought in that were experts in those particular fields, and it was, I thought, a very, very successful presentation. So that's where I see this this coming into play, and the importance, I think, of being able to define the cumulative impacts to a projects so that we can make sure we have all the right people involved in them and addressing those concerns.
Thank you for that. That was very good. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, through the chair.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, it's Mark Burgess. This may be more of a question than a comment, but when in the definition of cumulative impact, I looked through the Wetlands Protection Act and they don't define it. And a lot of times the local regs reflect the state regs, but the definition of cumulative impact, I didn't find it in the DEP Wetlands Protection Act. The question that I have is, cumulative impact is considered in relation to other past, present, or anticipated future activities. Help me understand. I'm not sure the board, I mean, isn't that like speculation? Can the board make a decision about one project based on what it thinks might happen in the future? Just help me understand that, because I'm not sure.
I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, I didn't really advocate for the future component to that, but I think that's what we ended up voting on. I think Mark's point is a valid point in terms of not being certain as to what's going to happen in the future. But I think the commission can certainly express concern for the present status of a waterway and what might be happening looking forward. So I didn't object to using that language, but I can understand where Mark's coming from.
I would take a different approach, though. I think we do tend to look at future impacts. So, as an example, one of the concerns that I just mentioned, that project that we had was impact to the marsh, but probably a better example would be pilings and potential scouring. You know, you put in a piling and you have to look at what that's going to do to that salt marsh or to that resource area in the future, not just today. It's not just the installation of that piling. We have to look at what the effect will be of the existence of that piling in the resource area. So from my perspective, yes, there is a future view that we take toward these projects as well, Mark.
Okay. Just looking to see how it might impact the things that we do and help just help us both understand what the regulations are trying to achieve.
Yes. Yep.
So, okay.
All right. Good. Any other questions? Comments?
I have a question. This is Pam Newbert here. I can't quite figure out how to raise my hand. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, my question here is, well, have cumulative impacts. Impacts is a word that implies potential negativity surrounding the project. And you may want to consider using cumulative effects, because sometimes you may have projects that come together and they could have a cumulative positive effect. And so similar to our NEPA system and the National Environmental Policy Act, they use cumulative effects instead of the cumulative impacts, which allows for a consideration of both positive and negative.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see that. I appreciate that comment. I think it's something we'll have to take into consideration.
The definition does say, after cumulative impact, it does say the effect of a subject activity, which is what Pam's getting at, saying effect instead of impact. And nowhere in the I can see how you would think that impact kind of implies a negativity. We could potentially massage the wording a little bit, because again, like Pam said, it could be positive or negative, but it does say the effect of subject activity, we try not to make it positive or negative.
Okay.
If I could just follow, I think that, this topic has been discussed for decades, and it's had a lot of attention, but it hasn't really received the science behind it to really support cumulative impacts studies. But the use of the word impact has been pretty continuous throughout this discussion. And then secondly, for our interest, what we're talking about, I can't imagine a positive impact from the things that we're trying to reduce interactions with resource areas. So I don't see any reason to vary from the word cumulative impact, the phrase.
Any other thoughts?
I have one, Brad, or through the chair, Brad. I think there is an opportunity for positive cumulative impacts, and the example I would bring is that improved designs move forward to reduce impacts from the old designs. So in that respect, those projects moving forward, if they're all done up to the latest standards, provide a positive impact to the environment by protecting it more than it used to. So I think there's every opportunity to see positive impacts cumulatively.
Think back to that walkway once again, and one of the concerns that we had was that installing the walkway over the salt marsh would impact the salt marsh. But ultimately, the testimony that we were given by the salt marsh expert was the construction of the walkway to preserve the salt marsh from damage by people walking on the salt marsh instead. So there can be positive, I think, from my perspective. What we might want to consider is changing the heading of this section to cumulative impacts and effects. Just add both in there, because we do mention both in the definition or in the description, as Amy has said, right? Where we say the effect of a subject activity.
I think saying whether you add another word to the underlined part or just leave it in the definition, I think it does the same thing. I think just keeping it this is cleaner.
All right.
But
Well,
that's up to the commission.
We'll take it under consideration. I don't think we need to just make a decision here tonight necessarily, but our goal is to get these kinds of input and comments and everything, so we can make sure that we fine tune these before we put them on the warrant article for May. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item that we have is the proposed changes to the water dependent structure bylaw. I don't know, Brad, do you want to present this, or do you care?
If you want me to, I just would have to be prompted by the screen.
Okay, you can use my computer too, Fred. I can just give it over to you.
Yeah, I haven't really seen this.
Yeah, it's taken from the warrant article. It's basically yours, just in the same format as the warrant article.
Yep.
To make it a little bit.
Well, maybe I'll just use the screen and just be prompted that way. And,
Caleb, can you bring up the structures one? Thank you.
Okay, so we've been working on the update to the bylaws for water-dependent structures since probably 2019. I think discussions began before then, 2014 actually, and by my records, this would be the 8th public hearing we've had. We've had 6 at the Conservation Commission within hearings, and then we had 1 joint hearing with the Waterways, and we had a hearing that Ernie and I attended with the Board of Selectmen. So certainly well vetted and well discussed over a large number of hearings. The concern was that we were seeing a large increase in the number of water-dependent structures, and most of these were being approved under variances, and there was concern over impacts from these structures were not being adequately addressed by our present regulation and bylaws. So we spent a fair amount of time discussing it, and let me go through the changes that were voted on in 2021, I believe, January 2021.
February, yep.
February. Okay, so some of the history, this concern is not new. It was discussed in great detail before my time, before all of our time on the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission in 2003 actually began votes for changes focusing on Pleasant Bay, and it wasn't actually enacted until town meeting in 2009. So I don't really know the history behind that large period of time. But either way, there was a lot of concern that goes back almost 20 years on what was happening in Pleasant Bay. And the major changes that were made was a moratorium on new docks and piers in Round Cove, and then the placement of a setback of 250 feet for structures in Pleasant Bay itself. So the town at that point had a 65-foot setback between neighboring docks. With these changes, they increased the setback to 250 feet in Pleasant Bay, and really, we stopped hearing about concerns. I think those measures really mitigated a lot of the impacts and a lot of the concerns that were occurring in Pleasant Bay and Round Cove. So we looked at our bylaws and we proceeded to discuss changes to setbacks, water depth from float to substrate, salt marsh impacts from docks and piers, and we went ahead with a number of proposals. And I think I'll take the next slide at this point. This discusses impacts, and I think for me the impacts really come in a few major categories. One of those is impacts to salt marsh by the pier structure through primarily shading and displacement of salt marsh. Secondly, scouring of salt marsh and shellfish habitat from piers as well as floats, as well as the boats that are sitting on floats. I think scouring has been acknowledged as one of the primary impacts that come from these structures in tidal areas. And let's see, beyond that, I think if I were to place a higher priority, I would say coastal bank alterations as well. When these structures are permitted, they're allowed a 4-foot path to access the structure. What we often see is alteration to the coastal bank, and it may not even be permitted, but this has gone along with these projects quite frequently, where there's an interest with a dock to have a little more access, a little more room at the coastal bank, and you'll see a lot of clearing and alterations at the coastal bank that can go along with some of these structures. So those are the ones that I've seen, and then what you see on the screen here is a little more detail in some of these impacts. Off-season storage is obviously another one that we see that shouldn't happen. It's not permitted, but it happens frequently. And these regulation and bylaw changes would, I think, clarify the rules on off-season storage. Next slide, please. All right. All right, I covered some of this already. We actually had public hearings in 2019 as well. We had a joint hearing with the Waterways Commission, and then we had another Conservation Commission hearing in 2019. We had 3 at least in 2020, and then we had these here January 26th, 2021, February 3rd, where we actually voted on changes to these bylaws and regulations. And then Ernie and I met with the Board of Selectmen in May of 2000, I forget what month it was, maybe half a year ago? Or what?
Twice, I think, or John, maybe John and Ernie also did, but I think there was one in the spring and then more recently one in November.
At our annual meeting, our annual presentation,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
mentioned it and then gave a dedicated presentation to it later in the year.
So we're moving towards we have approval from the Board of Selectmen to have this on the town meeting warrant of May 2022, and the town voters will decide as to where they want to go. Next slide. All right, so let's go through notable changes for water-dependent structures.
This is more just an interpretive change, I think, that we found in the past that we had the definition that the water-dependent structure had to have a vessel lying alongside of it.
Yeah.
And, walkways, floats for launching kayaks, that sort of a thing were potentially considered not water-dependent structures when, from our perspective, they should have been.
Mhm.
So we've changed this just to clarify the definition of it.
To add elevated walkways and change it so people may access the water, not just so vessels may lie alongside.
Yep. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is the moratorium on new structures, docks and piers in the Herring River. We had a lot of discussion on, expressing concern for what was happening in Herring River. Clearly, we have a fair amount of degradation occurring in the river from a number of sources, and we've had an increase in docks and piers in recent years, the last 10 years or so. We discussed having an increased setback. We discussed having a uniform setback as a Pleasant Bay of 250 feet. And what was I think the intention of the commission was that they felt some other water bodies in town didn't have the same concerns as the Herring River. And so such a large setback, say for Witchmere Harbor or Allen's Harbor, might be just overly restrictive to sites that could be suitable for new structures. So we went ahead and we proposed to have a moratorium on what we felt was the most sensitive and vulnerable area in the town. Really a very special resource area in the town of Harwich. So this would impose a moratorium on new structures for properties in Herring River. Next slide. All right, so this pertains to features of the decking and piers. And so what we're doing is we're trying to increase dimensions, spacing, as well as height and width to try to reduce shading impacts to salt marsh. And in some of these, I think there was really good consensus on this, and we've been applying some of these already, just through discussions with proponents. There's also studies that support these dimensions that find that when you can have your height 1.5 times the width of the deck above mean high water, you can reduce your impacts to salt marsh. And so this is clarifying that and putting it down in the bylaws. And we can come back to those specific dimensions if you like. Basically, we're increasing our deck spacing from 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches. And we're seeking to have a height of 1.5 times the width of the deck where we have salt marsh adjacent to the decking. Other areas where we don't have salt marsh resources, the deck can be 1.25 times the width of the deck. Okay, next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, this is a little small.
Yep. All right, so this looks like it's clarifying the variance language as well as a little more clarity to the Shellfish survey language. We did improve our regulation language on shellfish surveys to try to just get a little more standardization in how they're executed. And so this language here connects the bylaws to the regulations on shellfish surveys. It also clarifies the variance language to make it clear that there needs to be clear and convincing evidence provided by the applicant that the proposed project will not have an adverse impact to the wetland resource area. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is actually, you might call it a relaxation of the bylaws. There was some concern expressed on our rules that asked to have docks in the water from May 15th to October 15th. And what we're doing here is we're allowing docks to stay in the water till November 15th. And this just gives people a little more chance to enjoy some of that tail season in the fall when they can do some boating and maybe go out and have some fishing opportunities for fish that come in the fall. So it's really just adding a month to the fall season when we allow floats and docks to be in the water. Is that a fair characterization? The second part, K, we're increasing the water depth from 2.5 feet to 3 feet at mean low water on all sides of the float. This 3 feet is used by the town of Yarmouth and I think several other towns on the Cape. And what this does is it reduces some of those scouring and erosional impacts that we discussed earlier from boats and floats by raising them up a half a foot at mean low water. Okay, next slide, please.
Those were all the changes that were in the warrant article. And before we open up to public comment, I just add for the public, if you want copies of these proposed changes or the presentation, which the presentation was taken directly from the warrant article, you can feel free to contact the Conservation Department, either phone or email, and we'd be happy, you can find that on our town website. We're more than happy to provide that for you. As we get closer to town meeting, this will also be posted on the town website for more people to be able to review. So we want as many people as possible to have a chance to weigh in on this. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Let's open it up for comments. The changes that we've just reviewed with respect to water-dependent structures.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Michelle Hunton. I'm here on behalf of Oliver Cox and Dr. Donald Anino, who both own properties on the Herring River. We wanted to address some legal concerns we have regarding the proposed moratorium on new water-dependent structures on the Herring River. Just sort of as an overview in general, in order for a municipality to impose a moratorium, they're required to show that there's a reasonable basis for the enactment of the moratorium. And as part of that showing, towns are generally required to produce evidence, quantitative evidence, showing that what their concern is, that they have a real tangible concern, and also that their response to that concern is reasonable. So for example, here, the Harwich Conservation Commission or the town of Harwich, assumingly their concerns are obviously the potential individual and cumulative impacts on wetland resource areas, and they're required to show point to specific and quantitative evidence demonstrating that water-dependent structures will adversely impact these resource areas. And I haven't personally seen, and our team hasn't seen any quantitative evidence that the Commission has presented showing that water-dependent structures adversely impact the resource areas under the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Todd and Don from Coastal are here, and I think after I speak, I know they wanted to talk a little bit further about the details on their opinions on whether or not new docks would have an impact on wetland resource areas. Another point we wanted to make regarding the moratorium was that the moratorium seems to cut against the Commission's recent approvals of properly designed docks on the Herring River. Our office was involved in a few dock projects, most recently the Fall Project, whose dock project, who they own property on Chase Street, and also the Turners, who own property on Strandway. And the commission issued order conditions approving their projects, finding no adverse impact to the resource areas. So it seems that the commission has acknowledged that projects do come before the commission that will not adversely impact the resource areas when they're designed appropriately in accordance with the regulations. So this moratorium seems to cut against the fact that the commission has acknowledged that there are projects out there that won't adversely impact the resource areas. Another second requirement that municipalities have to demonstrate as part of imposing a moratorium is that the moratorium must be narrowly tailored to a reasonable concern. For example, there's a case that I reviewed where a town wanted to initiate a moratorium on the issuance of building permits, and the town basically had to show that their concern was that, in that case, was that there wasn't enough water available for the town. So the concern was the availability of water, public water supply. And so as part of showing that they needed a moratorium, they said that they needed time during the period of the moratorium to conduct a study on water supply and then potentially amend their regulations to address their concerns regarding water supply. So basically the moratorium gave them time to come up with a fix to their concerns of the water supply issue. And the moratoriums also need to be limited generally, according to Massachusetts case law, to a certain time period. It can't be an unlimited period of time. So basically the moratorium has to show, Harwich would have to show that it needs a certain amount of time to conduct a study as to the concerns as to adverse impacts from water dependent structures, and they need that time to sort of address the issue or amend their regulations. And I don't see any time limit, at least that I haven't seen, unless I'm missing something on the moratorium here proposed here, and I don't see any real reason for it in terms of conducting a study or trying to find a way to address the regulations related to this. Another thing just to point out regarding that, in terms of a lot of these other cases where moratoriums were allowed, as part of the time period for the moratorium, the town was trying to amend regulation. Here it seems like the commission has already done that by the proposals in the bylaw. For example, what you just went through, how there's proposed amendments to the water dependent bylaw regulations with regard to increased spacing, the planks, increased height of the docks, increased water depths, and all of those proposals will help to benefit the resource areas and are kind of going towards addressing this concern of the commission of the adverse impact of the resource area. So in our view, because the commission's already doing that and has proposed bylaw changes, and then assumingly if this gets approved, those changes would go into the wetland regulations on water dependent structures. It already really has addressed that issue. So it seems like kind of based on a review of all of this, that this moratorium proposal doesn't meet the legal requirement according to Massachusetts case law. I don't know if Todd or Don want to jump in to address a few more scientific, technical concerns.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, commissioners. Just to identify myself, I'm Todd Turcott. I'm a professional engineer with Coastal Engineering, and I head up I'm the division manager for the Waterfront Marine Division with Coastal. And I know Coastal has had a long history working with the town on projects as well as presenting in front of the commission over the years on water dependent structures. So we appreciate the opportunity to represent the Coxes and the Aninos and a few other of the residents that are contemplating docks in the Herring River and in other Richmond Harbor, and that we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of the commission tonight to talk about some of these bylaws. And that they've been 12 years having not been revised is probably a good time to look into that. We believe there are several positive changes to the bylaws, and we believe that the commission has the opportunity to actually improve resource areas that you're trying to protect. But this moratorium, in addition to the legal aspects of it that's presented, it seems to be unfounded without any real evidence of showing the adverse impacts, specifically in the Herring River, and goes against what is permitted within the state regulations and outlined in what I think most everybody knows about the small docks and piers, a guide to permitting small pile-supported docks and piers that was developed by Mass DEP and many agencies, basically the design guide. Also, even in tonight's testimony, Mr. Chairman, you even identified a recent project that was brought to you that identified potential adverse impacts in the first meeting, and by the second meeting with proper performance standards, proper expert testimony, it illustrated that the specific project did not actually have those adverse impacts that you were believing that existed after the first hearing. So to put a straight moratorium on a handful of potential new docks in the Herring River seems to go against what you're trying to mitigate and protect in the resource area. So, that even tonight's testimony kind of goes against what this bylaw moratorium proposed is. So, the design guide was developed with Mass DEP, CZM, Division of Marine Fisheries, Army Corps, EPA. It wasn't done lightly. It was done back in 2003, and they provide the standards for small docks and piers to protect against potential negative impacts to the wetlands that may detrimentally affect water quality, circulation, sediment, all the things that you guys are trying to protect. And you stated they're all areas that need to be considered in every design. But this design guide was done 20 years ago and has effectively protected those water resource areas. So I think by circumventing that and going straight to a moratorium without further evidence kind of goes against what the guideline was meant for. And, in one specific aspect, it's mentioned that the moratorium was put on in Pleasant Bay in 2009. And that is actually correctly proposed because that is considered an area of critical environmental concern, and that is the one area in the design guide that states docks cannot be permitted. So that should be an area that is not allowed to have a dock based on those guidelines. This area, Herring River in particular, is not identified as an area of critical environmental concern. As engineers, we like to use evidence and studies and have the opportunity to present each case on its own merits. And I think by imposing the moratorium, you're taking that away from engineers and scientists who have that expertise and can evaluate each case by case project and present it on its merits. There's a couple of things I think as an engineering firm and working with the conservation commissions in many other communities, you actually have an opportunity to take, instead of a moratorium, look at mitigation measures that are reasonable, that can address some of these concerns when a dock is presented, that maybe there's some ways to provide mitigation for shellfish propagation, salt marsh restoration, or even dredging. Dredging considered as a shellfish habitat restoration. Maybe it's better to dredge than not. So those are some of the things that I think need to be considered by the commission. Without any evidence, to just go straight to a moratorium seems premature. I know it's been talked about for many, many years, but without the evidence, there's nothing to support it at this point. We've looked briefly at how many properties in the Herring River might qualify for a dock, and it's anywhere from maybe 6 to 9 more docks. Is that really going to be a cumulative effect in the future with all 6 of those or all 9 of those going forward? I think that's where it needs to be looked at, and where can those new docks provide some mitigation that might be able to support and improve the Herring River. And one last thing, that just to talk about mitigation, Coastal was engaged by the town of Harwich several years ago to look at a harbor-wide management plan, a town-wide plan. And one of those areas was dredging Allen's Harbor and improving the water quality of Allen's Harbor. And that was completed approximately 2012, 2013 to improve the water quality. So dredging actually can benefit shellfish habitat and look at other ways to improve the resource areas. So I think from a engineering standpoint, without going into very specifics on each aspect, I think this moratorium, whether legal ramifications or not, I think has a larger impact on mitigation versus protection. And I think you're possibly missing a very good opportunity here. So with that, if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to hear them. But I think Don has a few more specific comments that were addressed in the concerns.
Through the chair, I'll try to be brief. Thank you for this time, though, for people that are definitely concerned. I mean, I think we've got a number of people here that are not only just engineers and professionals that take a lot of time to try to do the right kind of design in a given resource here. And I think Harwich Conservation Commission has been very receptive to most of the engineers and presenters during hearings, and have given great opportunities for us to advance engineering styles and techniques. I think, I don't know, would it be possible that Todd shares his screen? Because there's a couple of photos, and I'm really going to be brief. I have a couple of photos just for people to look at, to consider while you're considering and deliberating on the bylaw changes. And I agree with Todd. There's quite a few in here that were actually taken from the small docks and piers guideline, those dimensions that were mentioned by Brad. So that document, just to build on it a little more than what Todd built on it, it was adopted in 2003, but it was during a time period, I think maybe Brad will recall, that DEP was going through a struggle with the, quote, cumulative impacts of docks on Cape Cod. And I think DEP Waterways and DEP Wetlands got together to develop this, to intertwine the 91 navigational aspects of people wanting to access the water with the ramifications of those applications to the Wetlands Protection Act. And I think Liz Kula-Harris and probably Jim Mahala were highly involved in trying to develop a design manual that would address the very things that I think the Commission's concerned about with wanting to implement a moratorium in Herring River, specifically water circulation, water quality, coastal bank effect, slope stability, and a host of other things that we all have to take into consideration when we're doing the design. Height above salt marsh. I don't. Can Todd share the screen, or if not, that's okay.
Don, I wanted to get permission from Amy, if I could.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is that okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Caleb, can you give Todd Turcotte permission to present, please?
So I think you probably were, a few of you were on the commission back when we were doing a dock application for Mark Aldrich on Herring River. And one of the things Coastal Engineering and Wilkinson Ecological Design did was go out and do a salt marsh report and investigation as to whether or not existing docks were adversely affecting salt marsh. And most of the docks that are in Herring River are designed to the right height with the right light penetration, as you can see on this particular dock here. And I'm not selecting out docks that just have salt marsh, because most of them along the Herring River that were designed after 2003 do show that there's evidence of not an adverse effect to salt marsh by the virtue of the fact that salt marsh is growing under this particular dock. If you just zoom up quick, Todd, to the pile that's the last pile that's in the intertidal, you can see in that location right there, this is an area where the Herring River can flow pretty good. And you'll notice, and this dock has obviously been in for a while because it's got quite a few shellfish hanging off the last set of piles. So we don't see very much scour taking place there. I think that's mainly because it was designed properly. The cross members are up out of the mean high water area. And I think that's the reason that we don't see the effect of salt marsh here. I think the distance between docks on Herring River doesn't lend to the idea that in your statements in the bylaw request for change, the high density. I realize that in Allen Harbor and Weechmere Harbor, those docks are very highly dense, but most of that area is already taken up by docks, maybe one or two pieces of property left in those areas. But there really isn't an opportunity for high density of docks along the Herring River because of the length that each property has in terms of frontage. And like Todd said, and some of the homeowners that are on the line who helped us also look into just how many docks could potentially be presented over the next, let's say, number of years is less than a dozen. So I realize that could be a lot, but I think that with the design standards that we have through that manual that was developed by Wetlands and Waterways can assist. But I think there's other things that the commission could be looking at while they're developing these requests to changes in terms of orders of conditions, where we could take advantage of the fact that docks are in the water, shellfish like water, and I've seen in many cases in other states, I'm not saying that other states are better than Massachusetts, we love our state, but they put actual shellfish nets hung down underneath their piers, and they fill them with shellfish. And that assists in developing better water quality. So it may be small in amount, but I've always been of the mind that a small amount is better than no amount. So I think that also, Todd, if you would go to the photograph, there's some information about the number one, construction activity impacts. We've got a contractor, and there's some other contractors that use the same method, but there are methods of constructing docks that will keep the contractor off the salt marsh. This is over in Sandwich, where there's a substantial off of the shoreline there, where the salt marsh is, up to 100 feet wide. And there are docks out in those locations, and they are not adversely affecting salt marsh, and the construction didn't adversely, because this contraption here, it may look funky. It's developed by Anchor Marine, Chris Norjo, and he actually constructs this apparatus out at the end of the dock during high tide and sets up two of the piles of beds. And then he uses a rail system that goes landward and installs the piles from the upper side of the dock so that he's never down, or no machinery is ever down in the salt marsh. So we've got some unique things that could assist in avoiding to have you folks go through the process of a moratorium, where you might think that the moratorium is a good route, but in the long run, people along the Herring River are going to access the river. And I don't know how many times we've seen it. We've seen it in many towns, Chatham, Harwich, typically that side of the Cape, where people will trudge across the salt marsh with their kayak to get to the water. And in the long run, if you talk about cumulative effects over long periods of time, as people walk on the salt marsh, where you inadvertently have a moratorium so you don't have people elevated over the salt marsh and keeping the salt marsh safe from pedestrian traffic, you may, in the long run, adversely affect the very resource areas that you want to protect. And I think we're presenting all these items because we just want you to consider them during your deliberations and during your adoption of these very highly important regulations and endeavors that you're taking on as a commission. And thank you for that time.
Thank you, Don. Can you go back to your photograph that shows that dock and pier on Herring River?
Todd can, yeah, there's one there.
Yep, a little further back.
There's another one, that one there, Brad?
Yeah, so what you have right there is you've got a scour zone right at the line. So that photograph doesn't help the audience really at all. You've got to take that photograph along the shoreline looking up downstream or upstream. And what you'll see there is there's a scour pocket from those pilings right there on the line. And you'll see more salt marsh upstream and downstream of that dock. And that is a very common condition. I don't know of any docks between Lowell County Road and Route 28 and the Herring River that don't have that type of scouring. The Wetlands Protection Act does not allow that type of impact, nor do our bylaws, yet it keeps happening. So this is a very real impact that occurs in that part of the river, given the river flow, and it's something that should not be allowed by present regulations, yet it occurs again and again. So I think if you had a different photograph there, it wouldn't really serve your purposes.
Point well taken, Brad, but I think in the long run, I'd like to see some photographs from the commission in terms of their contention that they need to have a moratorium based on just that we want a moratorium and based on people's saying. That I think so far, most of the people that have made comments want to see some type of evidence that we're required to provide. And yes, I suppose you're right, we could take different types of photographs, but that's also in your purview as well, because you're the folks that are making this plea to your taxpayers and voters that there's these adverse impacts. So to just say they're adverse and not present, and then use our own photographs, which is great, I'm glad you're using it to point that out, but I still say that this salt marsh under this particular dock is healthy. And maybe more investigation would indicate that there could be hermit crabs that are causing this issue with the salt marsh, which is also a consideration that should be taken into when reviewing projects, because it may be not the docks or not the piers or not the boating, but some other thing that's going on. So I appreciate the comment though, Brad. Thank you.
Yeah, I just really strongly disagree with you, Don, on this one. The scouring impacts, they're quite obvious between the two bridges. At our January hearing in 2021 and the February hearing, we did show photographs. I'm not sure if you folks attended those hearings, but I have a catalog of photographs. It really isn't that hard to demonstrate that our regulations are not doing what they're supposed to do to avoid these impacts. Shellfish impacts are harder to demonstrate, and those would take quantitative studies that are not available. But scouring impacts to the edge of the river, as well as salt marsh, they're quite obvious in my opinion, and so I don't think that anyone's stretching on this. This part of Herring River has been degraded, and we think that structures are part of the problem. And so, you know, the only other thing we could do, and we discussed this at great length, was to increase our setbacks. And we decided not to because of concern for this particular river, given the fast tidal flow. Places that don't have tidal flow, like Witchmere Harbor and Allen's Harbor, you don't have such scouring impacts as you find in Herring River.
Yeah, but Brad, also, through the chair, sorry, aren't you not considering that because of the statement you just made, which has to do with flow rate, that the Herring River's flow rate also affects the salt marsh? I mean, you can't have one without the other, and quite honestly, I really think it would be appropriate with this big change that you're proposing, that there's more than just saying it's difficult to show shellfish impact, but it's not so difficult to show salt marsh impact. And then you don't bring to the table any of that evidence. And that's very disconcerting to me, because when we come in to you as a commission to present, we have to have experts, and we have to have people that know what they're doing. And I think that's why the commission approved the last walkway applications, because they brought in some experts that knew what they were talking about. So it would really be nice if that were the case, that the commission is pursuing this with some scientific methodology to back it up. And that's just what I think these homeowners are concerned about.
Don, if I took you out to this spot and we walked down 50 feet the other side of the dock and looked at the line of the salt marsh, and you saw that it was healthy and uniform, and you went up to the dock and saw that it was not, wouldn't you conclude those pilings had a scouring impact to that salt marsh?
Of course I would.
Okay, well, I can.
But I don't think.
I'll take you out
But
tomorrow.
I don't think that. No, you don't have to take me out. You have to present to these people who are your taxpayers, who are looking to you for guidance. Show them the money. That's what I'm asking you to do. The same thing you ask us to do. You're presenting something to your townspeople, and I think it behooves you to have some kind of physical evidence, even if it's you go out and take photographs, and then during the town meeting, I don't have a problem with someone coming up with that, but to just say it and then to use my photograph because you don't go out and take the photograph, Brad, I think you just have to do your due diligence like you asked us to do. And I respect your position, Brad. I've always have. We do disagree, and that's okay.
I think Brad is
Mr. Chair.
I think Brad is saying that we do have photographs, Don. I mean, we're looking at the one that's on the screen now simply because you had put it up. But we do have a series of photographs that he's mentioned that we've looked at and determined that there are negative impacts. And just as one point of clarification too, it's come up twice that we did approve that prior project that was a walkway over the salt mark. It was not a water-dependent structure. So, it's been raised twice as being evidence of why we should perhaps rethink this moratorium.
Hold on,
it was not
because we have about 300 feet of marsh without any structure, and it looks just like that.
Well, I'm not here to.
What?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, could I ask for
Make sure you go through the chair. Make sure you go through the chair.
One moment, please. Amy, did you have a comment to make?
Yes, thank you. Two quick things. We can certainly put together, and I agree with you. I mean, a lot of times the commission does require evidence to be presented to them, so we should provide something to back up ours. We do have some photographs, we can put them together, and certainly we still have time to go and look at additional ones. But over the years, we have accumulated some photographic evidence. We're happy to put that together. I will do that for the commission. And just as you're going forward, Ernie just said it, but make sure that when you speak, that you get recognized by the chair to speak, and please say who you are. That way we have it for the record, and we can make sure we articulate everything clearly.
Thank you. Other comments?
Through the chair. Thank you, Amy.
Yes, this is Mark Burgess again.
Yes, Mark.
So, Brad, through the chair, Brad, I think I finally understand where you're coming from pile scouring. And we've been a lot of back and forth on this. And you're right, none of the pictures that any of us have taken are from that up and downstream angle. So that would be interesting to see that. And in my travels in Harwich, I'll go take a look. I'm more than happy to walk some sites with you if you have time. And we can work out a schedule. Having said that, as an engineer, I'm thinking of this saying, okay, I know that when I design docks, I try to get piles not in the marsh, but what ends up is they end up on the edge of the marsh. So the landward edge of the marsh between the patents and then the shrub vegetation, whatever, that's not a concern. So moving forward in a design style, maybe the way to address this particular issue is the seaward pile has to be X amount of distance away from the seaward of the edge of the marsh. And then the current effects or the effects from the current and this and that are away from the marsh. You solve your problem. And this is another example of how good designs meet the needs of the commission and the commissioners and the residents, as opposed to just an out and out moratorium. Those 10 people are going to be really upset. And if I was them, I'd put in an application and probably have it appealed no matter what. It's just the way forward here is to manage the designs to meet the need, not eliminate them. It's just not fair to those 10 people when everybody on the sides of this table have struggled so hard. I've been with you from the beginning on these bylaws, and they're much, much better. They're huge. Looking at all of them, the moratorium is really the only thing I have any issue with. I just don't think it's the way to address the issue, and I think if we put our heads together, we can come up with different design options that do address the issue, and then everybody's happy instead of a lot of people not happy. So that would be my input on the moratorium. I think there's definitely we've made a ton of progress over the years. It's those new designs are proving themselves, and if there's more that we need to do as designers, I think we're all happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, somebody else have comments?
Yes, hi, Mark Sangiolo, 9 Sketchaconnet Way. My wife Susan and I were right on the Herring River. We have all of our nest egg tied up into our property. It's a 1790 house that we restored with our own sweat equity. And it was our hope that we would be able to have a dock someday. Frankly, we feel ganged up on. The Herring River is a beautiful little jewel of a boating and natural environment, and people enjoy the paddle boards and the boats and going down the docks and photographing and looking at the environment. And we have no problem with meeting standards and guidelines, but this whole thing just seems to me like a solution in search of a problem. You heard from the engineer saying that these things can be designed higher and let light in, and there's a minimal impact. And looked at the square footage compared to the area between the top of the bank and the 3-foot water depth. Minuscule, we're talking about minuscule. On top of that, like they said, there may be, I think there's less. My wife and I looked at it pretty closely. I'm an architect, she's a landscape architect. There might be 6 more properties that could qualify for decks. So we really feel ganged up on here, and we don't really understand where everyone's coming from. It doesn't really sound like science and database to me. Those photographs you showed, that looks just like we have 300 foot of marsh bank. That looks just like our marsh bank. There's no structure within 200 feet of that. So I'm a little bit concerned with what's going on. And if there's a positive thing, if the kind of bureaucracies are looking for things to do and looking for a legacy to say that they were involved in, there has been some good work. There's been some bad things too. But I'd say a positive legacy would be to create the guidelines so that these structures don't have a harm, which we know that they don't when they're designed properly. That's where I'm coming from. This is a really causing a lot of stress in our family financially, and I don't think it's right. I feel ganged up on. There's even if the 6 remaining decks were built out, it would have docks. It would have minimum impact on the overall situation. It's a beautiful boating committee. Let us just enjoy it the way it is now. And by the way, we are the caretakers of the river. It's not some regulations being imposed on us. We are the ones who are here all year. We pick trash out of the marsh. We pick debris. We call the harbor master when it's a problem. Everyone that I know here on the river is very respectful. It's a beautiful area. I just don't understand the focus on trying to harm these 6 families. Thank you.
Can I address that?
Sure, Brad.
Yeah, I just want to address one part of your question on not understanding where we're coming from, and I do understand your interest with the property you have. It makes a lot of sense to me, but I think one of the problems that has led to this discussion and to these proposed changes is the fact that nearly all docks in the last 15 years have been approved under variances. So the regulations say that you cannot impact salt marsh. They say you cannot degrade or impact shellfish habitat, or you can't even have new structures where there is shellfish habitat. Yet again and again, variances are issued to allow these structures to go in. And then there are some impacts. Some locations, the impacts are not very large. Some locations, they are very large. But we're trying to resolve this issue of variances being issued repeatedly, which are counter to the intention of our regulations and bylaws. So it really is, in our view, a significant problem. It's not minuscule, it's not minor. The number of properties are probably closer to 12 to 15. They're not 6. And so we're really trying to clean up our act and to put out really clear directions on how these things should go forward. Because if you issue variances on 90% of your proposals, that defies the very definition of a variance.
Through the chair, Brad, maybe one of the solutions to this is if you don't implement the moratorium, then applicants still have to go through the process. They still have to ask for a variance. And that's where the rubber hits the road. You know, other projects we've been able to demonstrate for each specific property project that the project as designed isn't going to have negative impacts. And the justification for the variance was enough for the commission to vote in favor of it. I still think that's the direction we should all head in. Each property is different, and grouping 10 or 15 properties into one bag and just not letting them do anything just isn't the way to solve the problem. So you're right, the variances, sometimes they're necessary. There's certain bylaws that we have to have a variance against all the time, and none of us agree none of us consultants agree that variance should even be in there, because we demonstrate time and time again that when docks and water-dependent structures are properly designed, they don't have an impact to shellfish, and certainly they have a less impact to shellfish than the people going to the site and disturbing the beach and digging up the shellfish in the first place. I mean, a dock can never have more impact to the beach and the shellfish than the act of digging them up. But the variance is the provision that allows everybody to put the rubber to the road, come up with the experts. The commission can now ask for a marsh expert if you want, and the customer has to pay for it, or we would do it ourselves. But the variance is the provision by which everybody justifies site by site, and a moratorium just doesn't cut it. It doesn't. I think it's the most negative thing you could do, and the commissions and us as consultants, we're charged with coming up with projects that work, and working with the commission to find a way to approve a project. That's what the regulations are for. The regulations are to approve work, not prevent it. It's to approve it under certain guidelines and performance standards. So to me, as I said, that's the way forward. To just shut it off completely is not the answer. It's not cooperating with the citizens. It's just not the right way to go. But the variance provision allows everybody, property by property, to justify it in whatever manner they can. And so I think you have the avenue without the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Michelle Hunting, may I speak for a moment?
One moment, please.
We have some people in the comments who have raised their hand and wish to speak who have not spoken yet.
I believe Pam was the first one.
Well, Pam has spoken, but somebody who hasn't spoken, I think the Coxes wanted to potentially say something. And certainly we can circle back. We just want to make sure everyone has a chance.
Yes, thank you. Permission to speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks again for hosting this conversation. My name is Oliver Cox. This is my wife, Allie. We own the property at 7 Skinchconnet Way. Allie and I got married in Harwich. We've spent as much time as possible with our family on the Cape, and we own and operate a business in Washington, D.C. Our parents and grandparents have instilled a deep love of the Cape and Islands' natural beauty, and we have every intention of passing that on to our future children. We have owned the property since 2015 and started the process of designing our dock in the summer of 2019. We have a deep appreciation of the flora and fauna of the Herring River and hope to build a dock to maximize our time spent paddling up and down the pristine river. I even built a 13-foot skiff I hope to have tied up on our future dock someday. This has not been an inexpensive or quick process, and as you all know, there are many regulations in place to mitigate any possible environmental impacts. We have worked with engineers, Shellfish, and legal experts, many of whom are on this call, to design a dock that doesn't require a variance with as little impact as on our beloved river as possible. And now we find out that you all want to ban future docks on the Herring River. As has been discussed, this is a solution in search of a problem. As one of a handful of properties left without docks on the river, we want to voice our opposition to this moratorium in the strongest possible terms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Don and Nino actually also wants to speak.
Don and Nino, if you have comments?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm here with my wife, Laura. We're the owners of 14 Point. And I've been coming to the Herring River since 1969. So I've seen multiple docks put, but what I'm trying to get around is one of my neighbors, Mr. Turner, who built his dock based on new requirements, monopiles and everything else. Recently went through where he had to resubmit to you guys to show that he did everything correctly. And members of the committee even kayaked underneath his dock, underneath his pilings, went around, commented such a good job was done and had such minimal impact. So this is a new dock that was done to a new specification. And everyone commented, that I watched it on the video, how much they liked it. And the next thing you're saying, even though it seemed to help with the new requirement, you pass a moratorium that no new structures can be put. So I don't fully understand why everyone was so happy with how that dock looked. And the next step is to hold all docks. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any other comments?
Hi, this is Michelle Hunton again. I had a couple of more quick comments to make. First, with regard to your concern regarding the increase in the number of variances, or how you say it seems like all projects are approved through a variance. I think in terms of at least with a variance regarding the prohibition of docks in town map shellfish areas, I think part of the reason why there are so many variances is just because there's a flat out prohibition against docks in that area. And there's not actually performance standards in your regulations or bylaw as to how to analyze whether a dock would adversely impact a shellfish, land-containing shellfish, whereas other bylaws and regulations I've seen in other towns do have actual performance standards. So the variance provision actually is the only provision in the regulations that allows for any analysis at all as to whether or not a dock will adversely impact shellfish area. And so the regulations as they stand, there's no way to even analyze it because it's a flat out prohibition. So the variance is the only way to analyze it. Whereas other bylaws or regulations in other towns that don't have a flat out prohibition actually provide, basically say what your variance says, you have to show evidence that there's no adverse impact on land containing shellfish. So I think there's a lot of variances because it's needed here because there aren't any performance standards, and that's the only way that it allows for a real analysis of whether there's any impact. And another quick point I just wanted to make about the concerns regarding some scouring. A few commissioners have said they've seen on some docks. It seems like there's other ways to address that aside from a flat out moratorium. I think, the commission can engage in some sort of enforcement action or reach out to those owners and try to find ways to improve the dock or those areas. But I think in particular with regard to all of the new proposed bylaw amendments here that I agree with, all of the other ones that are going to benefit your dock, such as increased height, water depth, et cetera. And along the lines with what Dr. Anino stated with regarding the Turner dock and how that was a newer dock that complied with more recent regulations and how there was no adverse impact. I think the fact that the commission is going further now and amending the bylaw to add more protective provisions to prevent adverse impact, I think is great. And I think that just shows that future docks are going to be even, designed in a way to decrease impact. So moratorium is sort of going against, everything the commission is doing a great job of and continually amending regulations to make the standards more stringent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pam
Anyone else in queue?
I don't know if Pam still has something.
Pam, did you have?
I do have, thank you for, through the commissioner. Let me see if I can get my webcam. Sometimes my webcam works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm getting a whole black screen there, so no, it's not going to work. I'm taking notes here, and I have to agree with what's been said here about a moratorium, in the sense that I think a wholesale prohibition for so few properties is not in the best interest for the town. It's not in the best interest for the habitat as well. We have an opportunity here to move forward with an innovative approach. I have to disagree with Brad. I think it's very difficult to say that the pilings are the wholesale reason that there's some impact on salt marsh. I think water quality is having an impact on salt marsh and has been having an impact on salt marsh many years, 50, 60 years. And I'm excited to hear that you're implementing in lieu fees, because I'm hopeful that one of the innovative approaches that you can use to help benefit shellfish and to help benefit salt marsh is to take those in lieu fees and put them towards water quality improvements, which would have a significant positive impact to the natural resource habitats in Harwich, in your water bodies, whether it's Wychmere or Herring River, there are innovative ways now to build docks and piers, as Mark and Don and Todd have mentioned. And there's new technologies that are coming out in leaps and bounds, every year, and these could be implemented. So I think that it's a disservice to the town to put a wholesale moratorium or prohibition on building more docks for just a few more properties that remain. And instead of thinking about prohibiting things, that we should be thinking about innovative ways where we can allow the homeowners to utilize their water sheet and utilize their property and do it in a way that allows us to use the best management approach, the best technologies that are available and coming out to benefit the habitat in and of itself. So I'm happy to discuss this more or answer questions, but I do see that you are already implementing some improvements like the in lieu fees that will allow you to do things perhaps as helpful as cleaning up the water quality, which will have great impact in a positive way for shellfish and salt marsh.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just have one more, and it's something that I don't think has been touched on yet during this discussion. The mitigation, especially the new mitigation that is in place from the regulations that were revised in November. As you're aware, in any new structure in a resource area is a 4-to-1 mitigation. So I just wanted to put in the commission's head that any of these projects now moving forward, the client already has to spend an average of $6,000 of mitigation that goes directly to the town to offset any potential negative impacts to shellfish. To hire a consultant and come up with a planting plan and put in 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of mitigation plantings is like another $20,000 or more. I mean, obviously depending on who you go to, but it's not an insignificant cost. And applicants who want these projects are willing to do all of that. One, because it's required, but two, just because the overall benefit, as stated in a previous project this evening, when you come up with a project that has proper mitigation and design, overall, the site has a great improvement. And by categorically denying the remaining projects on Herring River, you're going to see foot traffic through the marsh, which is going to be a cumulative negative impact. But you're also going to lose the opportunity to improve these sites with plantings that offset so many other impacts, soil and vegetation and critter habitat and all kinds of things. So the opportunity exists for all of these projects to greatly benefit the resource area, and the mitigation is there. And I just want the commission to know that it's no small task. Between all the mitigation that's required now, it is significant. It's a significant expense to these applicants, and but everybody's willing to do it because we all see the benefit. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Ernie, can I make a quick response on mitigation? Sure. Yeah, in terms of mitigation, Mark, I just wanted to give you my view, and I think that in practice, shellfish stocking for mitigation for docks in the shellfish area has been a really short-sighted policy because the benefits are very fleeting. You've got a couple of years of shellfish stocking, and yet you've traded that for habitat losses. So to me, from a natural resource management standpoint, it's a very short-sighted policy. The benefits don't last, and it comes and goes, but it's an easy way to convince commissioners to approve a project. So I have great concerns about that. Salt marsh mitigation is a whole different situation. You can find success with planting salt marsh, and you can improve salt marsh habitat. The seeding of shellfish, to me, you're trading seed for actual habitat loss.
Thank you.
Okay, Brad, but then we can change the mitigation. Like I said, the way to move forward here is to change the way we do things, not stop doing it, just change the way we do it. If that mitigation is unsatisfactory, let's come up with another way. I don't think anybody would be opposed to that.
Okay. Thank you. Amy?
Yep.
I would recommend to the commission that you would take everything that you've heard tonight under advisement, and at the next meeting, we have a discussion, which is going to be February 2nd, but have the commission have a chance to discuss all these items that were addressed tonight and see if there is any alteration you might want to make. The commission did already vote this, so the commission can go forward with this, but we want to try to all work together too. So just because it's getting a little bit later on tonight, I don't know if it's productive to have a whole discussion amongst the commissioners tonight about everything that's been said.
No, I agree 100%. The purpose of tonight's meeting is primarily to get feedback on this, and I think we've gotten a tremendous amount of feedback, both, I mean, for the most part positive. I mean, it gives us some new things to consider, but I appreciate all the input that we've gotten from everyone on this, and we'll take it all into consideration and determine whether we might changes to the proposals that we've already presented and come up with a final version to make sure it makes its way onto the town warrant. Bear in mind that, you know, the warrant article is something that's reviewed and approved by all of the residents of the town. So everyone will have an opportunity to look at this and voice their opinion through their vote on it. So with that, I would recommend that we didn't make a motion to open the public hearing.
Yeah, we can make one to close it though.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right, can we have a second, please? Second. Second, all in favor, let's start with Mark. Mark, if you're there. John?
Aye.
John, thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Alan, I'm sorry, I missed you.
Yes, aye.
Okay, and Stanley?
Aye.
Great. Jim?
Aye.
Brad? Aye. And I'm an aye. So the public hearing is closed. And again, thank you, everyone, for attending and giving us your time this evening. Next
Thank you for your time too.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an order of conditions for 602 Queen Anne Road, map 83, parcel S2. Amy?
Yeah, I drafted the orders of conditions for this project, which was for the trash removal, patio, and revegetation on a property that transferred without fully being in compliance. The new people just want to do the right thing. And so the commission voted in favor, and let me know if you have any changes to the conditions before we issue them.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any changes.
Anyone else have any changes they'd like to raise? Hearing none, can we have a motion? I'm sorry, was there a comment?
Well, Stan was trying to say something, but he was
Yeah,
muted,
go
or I
ahead.
thought he was.
Sorry.
No, I was muted. Can you hear me now, though?
Yeah, hear you great.
I don't know what's going on, but okay.
Well, we certainly can't help you. So, do we have a
We'll
motion?
send IT right over, Stan.
And we have a second? Jim's moved to approve the order of conditions
Yeah,
for
I
6.
agree.
Also, I'll second it.
And Brad's seconded it. The roll call on this, Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And Stanley?
Aye.
Great. That was muffled, Stan, just so you know. Jim?
Aye.
Aye, I'm aye. Brad,
Aye.
aye. Motion passes. Next item is another order of conditions for 23 Mill Road. It's the elevated walkway.
This was the elevated walkway in Saquatucket. The applicant has provided the required revised plan showing the structure to be an additional 9 inches higher over the marsh to meet that 1.5 to 1. So we have those plans. They're not in your Dropbox. If you'd like to see them, I'm more than happy to show it to you, but it meets what we talked about. And now, just let me know if you have any changes to the conditions.
No comments.
I had no comments on it. Anyone else have any?
No.
All right, we have a motion on this, please.
Yeah, I would like to move that we approve the order of conditions for 23 Mill Street, map 15, parcel U4-32.
So Mill Road, right?
Mill Road, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Second, please. I'll second it. All in favor, starting with Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Aye. Brad?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. That motion passes. Then we have 5 sets of minutes here. I found 2.
There are, let's see, we have September 4th, September 25th, and September 1st. Do you see those?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a quick,
Afternoon.
Ernie, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
I wanted to thank all of you guys. I know that we've struggled in the past and we agree to disagree, but I really want to applaud the commission in the way that this last project moved forward and we were able to find a way through it. And I just want you to know how much I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Mark. Believe me, we appreciate your feedback too. You've probably contributed more than most other people, I think, in all the public hearings that we've had, and I think it's been invaluable to have another perspective on all of the struggles that we've had with respect to these different provisions and all, so thank you for that.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and I was serious. If Brad wants to meet me, we'll run around and look at some of these things. I think it'd be good for both of us. So, Brad, you can contact me separately. No worries.
Well, I think we should schedule it and invite commission members as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
okay.
There's a quorum, though, I have to advertise it, so that's fine, we can do that, that's not a problem. I just need to know.
Well, it actually might be a good thing, given the public sentiment
It might
with
be a
respect to
good
this.
idea.
Yeah,
It's, yeah.
so if we could do
Well,
that.
You'd have to get
yeah,
permission.
on open projects, you have permission to go to the site. So I don't know how careful you need to be if we're just going to show up at like a closed project.
Yeah, well, and well, a lot of these that we're gonna be looking at have been there for years, so we would have to get property owner permission on them.
There's no real.
Yeah.
Harbor master can't take it down there in the boat?
No, we can do that too, but we have
Yeah.
to, we could take a boat ride too on a nice
Walking
day if
across
we
the
get
marsh, great, you're defeating your purpose.
What the hell?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, we'll work out the logistics of it, how we wanna do this,
Yeah.
but, we'll be
Yeah,
in touch.
no worries.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Let me check Dropbox real quick.
You're welcome.
But you should have 3 sets of minutes. I know it's not we always overestimate what we think we might get done. We try to be optimistic.
I gave you the set for September 1st. And then number of comments.
All right, so, let's see. Those were in your Dropbox. January 19th.
I'll just say that I read through all 3 sets of minutes, and as usual from Melissa, I found nothing. So
She did a good job.
I'm
checking
happy.
in that.
You found September 4th in there then, John?
Yeah, it didn't show up until this afternoon, but
Oh,
Yeah, she
maybe that's the difference.
it was a sunny day. I had nothing better to do.
I mean, I'd like to get a couple of these, so if you want to take a few minutes and look at them, or we can,
I still don't see September 4th.
item I, draft.
E, F,
Hey, John,
G, H.
can you hear me all right or not?
Yeah,
Weird.
Yeah,
better than before, that's for
G,
sure.
H, J, L.
Well, have you been getting feedback during this whole thing?
No,
Well, sometimes.
Like a bubbling, like a background noise from when, not when,
Long time ago.
No,
There's some of it going on when you're talking, Stan. And it's just the nature of the beast. You've got 2 open mics, and you've got the meeting room, town hall, and
Work got in the way.
is it, the town meeting, the town hall sounds good, but whenever anybody else talks, I'm getting kind of like a bubbly background noise when you guys talk.
the only way to solve that is for everybody who is an individual at a remote site to have headphones on.
all right, so does anyone have comments on the meet? Can we get back to, try to finish this up?
My dad was Bob Chase. We had the insurance.
Yeah, I have no comments.
Anybody else have any comments on the September 4th? What I would ask you do, if you haven't had a chance to look at them, please do so and feed any comments to Amy, and we can perhaps get another revised draft to the next meeting to
September
vote on.
4th you want?
September 4th, because I don't see it in my minutes.
We'll make sure, that's weird that, because it's in my Dropbox, and it says that you're one of the recipients. We'll resend it just to make sure.
Yeah.
But, okay, so September 4th, next time, that's fine. But we should have September.
25th and the 1st we have.
Yep, and that's September 25th of 2019. This is our backlog. We're finishing up, so let's do the September 25th.
Okay, can we have a motion, or anybody have any other comments on the 25th?
Ernie got me his corrected comments.
All right, hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the minutes for September 25th?
Yeah, I can make a motion to approve the minutes of September 25th, 2019.
I'll second that. All in favor, Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Stan? Jim?
I have to abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
Brad, were you there?
I think so.
Aye. And I vote aye, so the minutes pass. Minutes for September 1st. Any comments on those? Okay, there was only one change I noticed. It was like a capitalization of Conservation Commission or something like that, so
Okay.
that was relatively,
Mhm.
it looked to be really well done. So can we have a motion on September 1st,
Yeah,
please?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 1st, 2021.
All right, I'll second, and roll call. Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
And Stan?
Aye.
Jim, were you there?
Aye.
Ah, good.
Yeah, I was there at that one.
Aye, and aye. So minutes passed for September 1st. And the other ones we'll deal with the next meeting.
Your mother was my third grade teacher.
No kidding. Yeah, that's funny.
It looks like we're done.
So
Okay, if that's true, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, your mother.
I'll second that. Can we have a roll call? Mark?
yeah, that's something. I'll make
Aye.
sure she'll remember.
John?
Oh, yeah, when I see her.
Aye.
at events, she
Al?
always says how they are.
Yeah.
Aye.
She has a tremendous
Dan?
memory.
Yeah,
87.
yeah, nice.
Jim?
Aye.
Aye. Brad? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right.